This is the College Blitz on CBS 17 Plus.
Man, we're getting into the season here in college football in the Triangle, and welcome to College Blitz. Kevin Holden on CBS 17 Plus. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk a little bit of college football all around the Triangle. There certainly is a lot to discuss with UNC, with NC State, with Duke. We're getting down to crunch time with all those teams. Maybe none more so than the Tar Heels after their game out at Cal, which, look, right now, the state of the UNC program, every game is a little magnified. Every play, every situation is a little bit magnified. But UNC goes out west, and they lose another game, but they lose it 21-18, which is certainly, at least from a numerical standpoint, a big improvement over what happened against TCU or UCF or Clemson. Certainly a competitive game against a very good team. And it's a good way to start this thing off here on College Blitz. UNC fumbled the opening snap on offense. They gave up 14 points in the first quarter, and they fumbled the ball into the end zone late in the fourth quarter that basically led to Cal killing out the rest of the clock and winning the game. I just listed all the bad things there. In between, the defense for Bill Belichick's Tar Heels is very strong. 7 points allowed in the last 3 quarters of the game. And Cal, who has been a prolific offensive team at times this season, was limited to 214 passing yards and just 81 yards on the ground. The point here is that Belichick and his staff had 2 byes with the Clemson game in the middle. So you're talking about 2 games in 4 weeks. And they came out, and there were some parts of it that have been improved. Obviously, the thing you want to get out there is a win. That's the kind of thing that will help the season get back on track. That did not happen, but there were certainly positives for the Tar Heels. A little bit of a balance, I think, for this team right now, because if you look at just the scoreboard, just the result, you know, there's good versus bad here, right? It was a close game, but there were obvious issues. Those fumbles are just – you're not going to win football games when you're fumbling in key situations. And also, you know, giving up points early in the game and not being able to make a stop on defense and get the ball back late in the game. These are key issues. They are key moments, I guess you could say, in the game where Belichick would have felt like his team fell short. But this is a little different than a blowout. This is a game that UNC – easily could have won if not if they had everything done right, if they had done maybe one of those things right, not fumbled, let's say, on that first possession, or not fumbled with just a couple minutes left in the game going into the end zone. If you fix one of those problems, you may be looking at a win right here. So the question for Bill Belichick is, do you dwell on a game like this, knowing that there are plenty more games, one right after the other down the road, no more bye weeks for this team?
Not really. I mean, I'm disappointed in the results, but these guys, you know, we all bounce back quickly. You know, once it's over, it's over. You know, whether it was the wins against Charlotte and Richmond or a loss, it's after 24 hours, that game's in the books, and we're done with the corrections and so forth, and we're on to our next challenge. So that's kind of the way it's been every week, and I think that's the way it'll be going forward. I mean, it's always a good move when you win right after the game, but as soon as you get onto that next team, it's, you know, you're starting all over again. So that's where we are.
Now, we can talk about this next game and this next team, and we will a little later in the show. But just to touch a little bit on it, it's Virginia. And the interesting thing about that is early in the season, you probably look at this as UNC having a head of steam at this point, facing a Virginia team that would be very beatable, winning that game and starting on a little run toward the end of the season. But it turns out Virginia could end up being the toughest test of the season for UNC. Again, we'll get back to that as we're looking back here at the games from last week to start things off. Go on to what happened with Duke at home against Georgia Tech, and all of a sudden, man, Georgia Tech looks like one of the favorites in the ACC. It's a 27-18 win for an undefeated Georgia Tech squad who did a lot of things right in this game, and that is to say that Duke also did a lot of things right in this game. Darian Mensah threw for 373 yards and a couple touchdowns. Duke was limited in the ground game, just 68 total rushing yards. Nate Shepard with 50 of those rushing yards. But there were some gaudy stat lines. Cooper Barkate was 13 receptions for Barkate for 172 yards. So that connection, Mensah to Barkate, continues to be one of the more impressive, really, in the conference, and certainly a driver behind what Duke is able to do offensively. But they just couldn't turn it into a bunch of points. And the defense, again, where Manny Diaz and his group wants to hang their hat, they faltered late in the game. They left a lot of points on the table as well. Some possessions that went bad, the ball on the 1 yard line and couldn't get touchdowns out of it. All of that happened. But the interesting thing is the tone was actually set in the early part of this game. Duke was fighting out of a hole almost right away because in the first quarter, Georgia Tech's Omar Daniels picked up a fumble and returned it 95 yards for a touchdown, and that was the tone setter. Duke spent the rest of the time basically trying to recover from that. So how interesting that, much like UNC, Duke struggled in the very early going with a major mistake in the very early going of the game, and then they faltered late in the game, much like UNC did. And it led to a loss by a pretty similar score, 27-18, where UNC lost 21-18. The weirdest thing about this is that for Duke, the toughest part about it is timing. And that's really what Manny Diaz and his group have to deal with, because you're talking about bye weeks, right? It's Duke has dealt with their bye, and it was a bye week, a loss, and then a bye, which means it's 4 weeks between the Cal game and the Clemson game. And that's kind of difficult because you won a lot of games early in the season, but in recent memory, you haven't had a chance to win a game. You haven't experienced the feeling of winning a game. So Duke is going to end up having gone at least 4 weeks between wins. And, of course, going to Clemson is always difficult, even with Clemson being a little bit down this year. That's not really a team you want to run into, especially as you get toward the later part of the season and Clemson's really honing in on what they're going to be. So that's a tough one there. Manny Diaz after the game against Georgia Tech.
When you boss a game like we did for really the first 37 minutes of the game and only have a 3-point lead, at some point a team as good as Tech, they're going to have a response, and it's very easy to draw a line really between getting down there in the red zone, again not coming away with the 7 points midway through the third quarter on what had been really a fantastic drive, a great kickoff return, a great drive to get us down there, and then not score a touchdown right there. Is that when they responded, they were able to take game control, and so really it felt like a tale of two games. I wouldn't even say two halves, because I really felt like that drive, I think we took half of the third quarter off the clock. And so to play 2.5 quarters and be as dominant as we were and to only have a 3-point lead, at some point they were going to have a response. And when they made a response, they were able to capitalize.
So, and that's exactly what happened there. The Duke defense just couldn't quite contain Georgia Tech for the duration of the game, that big rushing attack that they have, including their rushing quarterback. So it's 27-18, and now Georgia Tech all of a sudden gets to the second half of their season without a single blemish on their record. And for Duke, it's a competitive game, but it's a loss. And now they have to sit on that for a week before they go to Clemson in early November. So it's certainly not the easiest thing. Now, we can say this about NC State. They didn't lose this past week because they were off this past week, and there's good and bad in that as well. The taste of the Notre Dame game is still, I think, a little bit in their mouths. It was a little bit of a difficult loss. It's a difficult placed loss in the schedule, especially because they had a couple of losses leading up to it. They lose to lose a couple of those games, Virginia Tech being one, leading in to that Notre Dame game. So that's pretty difficult. They lost 3 of 4 leading into the bye. You lose to Duke, you lose to Virginia Tech, you end up losing to Notre Dame. And so, again, another team with a week off to kind of try to flush what has happened in the recent history and go back to what for NC State was a very successful start to the season. And they've got to find a way to get back to what that start was in the back half of the season, because NC State's final 5 games at Pitt, at home against Georgia Tech, who we just talked about, at Miami, who is a powerhouse, at home against Florida State, who I mean, at some point, you got to think Florida State's just going to come out angry enough to do some damage. And then, of course, the UNC game to finish the season. That is a tough stretch to finish the regular season. But the thing for NC State that they want to maintain is that confidence. And they have said that the confidence is still there despite the 3 or 4 losses coming into the bye. They know that there are just a few things to tweak, and they believe that they can pick up at the very least the 2 more wins that they would need to be bowl eligible. And they're certainly looking for more than 2 wins, but they want to pick up at least 2 of those. You look at that 5-game stretch, and I mean, it's a tough situation, right? I mean, if you believe that Florida State is a win, and it could be a win, they still got to find one more. Is that UNC at the end of the season when the records go out the window? Is it this game at Pitt that they have coming up? You know, what exactly is it? Anyway, here is how NC State spent the bye week, kind of forgetting about Notre Dame and looking ahead.
I just laid down and just watched ball, watched some film, went to the fair, but, you know, other than that, nothing much. There's not really much. I don't really do much, to be honest with you guys.
Did the bye come in a good week for you guys, though?
Any bye is a good bye.
The bye week was good. It was a good time to recover and get our bodies back. We did a lot of meeting and talking as like the back end too, so I feel like we was able to catch up and get a head start on this Pitt game.
Going to the fair, it's a pretty good way to spend a bye week. That's a well-placed bye week, I gotta say. So maybe having a little bit of fun and getting rest and recovering and getting themselves back together is exactly what they wanted to do during this bye week as they get ready to face Pitt this coming week. Okay, so there's some big games coming up, and we'll talk about those here after the break. College Blitz, of course, UNC is going to be at home against Virginia. NC State is on the road at Pitt to begin what will be the crucial 5-game stretch of their season. And we'll talk a little bit about where Duke is going into their second bye right before they'll face Clemson. All of that after the break here on the College Blitz.
This is the College Blitz on CBS 17 Plus. This is the College Blitz on CBS 17 Plus.
Welcome back to the College Blitz. Kevin Holden here. Sarah Holland and Todd Gibson are out doing the real work while you and I sit and chat a little bit about college football. And plenty to talk about, of course, on the college football scene. UNC has a game that, depending on how you look at it, could be their toughest test or their biggest opportunity of 2025. And it's a bit of a surprise. This is one of the reasons why you play the games and all these preseason polls and everything go out the window, because I think this would be a little bit unexpected in terms of being a tough test for UNC. Virginia comes to Chapel Hill on Saturday. Virginia is 6-1, and they're riding a 5-game win streak. Can you believe it? Early in the season, back in week 2, NC State played Virginia in a non-conference game. I know it's a little bit weird, but basically the 2 schools agreed to play outside the conference schedule. So even though it's 2 conference rivals, does not count as a conference game. NC State won that game. Virginia hadn't lost a game since. They have won 5 in a row, and they won some close games. There was a 3-point win over Louisville, a 2-point win over Washington State. But look, when you pick up those wins, those close things go your way, momentum starts to go your way, and that's what's happened with Virginia. They've turned a couple of breaks basically into some big time momentum. They also could put up some points. Don't overlook what the Cavaliers can do offensively. They scored 48 against Stanford. They scored 46 against Florida State, and Jamari Taylor has 512 yards and 8 touchdowns on the ground this season, and Chandler Morris has certainly done some damage through the air. He's passed the 1,600-yard mark on the season through the air with 11 touchdowns. So Virginia has put together an impressive resume, one that has put them into the top 20 in the AP Top 25 poll. I mean, if you're on that side of things, you can't argue with that at all. But if you're on the UNC side and you want to start looking at a couple of weak spots and things that could end up going UNC's way, here's one of the things to look at. The big question mark for Virginia up to this point in the season has been their performance on the road. Going back to that game against NC State, the game is at Carter Finley Stadium. That was NC State beating Virginia, who, again, has not lost a game since. The game against Louisville was an overtime win. It was not a dominant performance by any stretch of the imagination. Still came out with a win. They still get that and still get the energy and the momentum and so on out of that. But Virginia's performances on the road have been certainly less convincing than they've been at home. Well, Saturday they go to Chapel Hill. They face Bill Belichick and the Tar Heels.
This is really been an impressive string that they're on. They've won a couple of close games in overtime, close game against Washington State, played really well in some critical situations in games, and that's been the difference for them. Coach Elliott's done an excellent job with the program, and there's certainly some similarities to the Clemson system that he's from his time there that he's brought to Virginia, but they're kind of their own. They've developed that into their own Virginia package. I'm not saying it's Clemson, but there are some elements of the Clemson system, especially offensively.
So picture that. He's comparing it to Clemson, and UNC having just faced Clemson and having dealt with when the Tigers were angry and came out and went double pass for 75 yards and a touchdown on the first play from scrimmage, trying to show something, trying to prove something, scoring all those points early in the game. That's a lot of respect. I think that was a healthy compliment right there that Bill Belichick paid to the Virginia offense. It's going to be a difficult test. And again, if you're talking in terms of pure talent on the roster, maybe it's the toughest test because Virginia comes in with that little number next to their name, and that hasn't really happened in terms of tests for UNC. Clemson lost some games early on, so by the time they got to Chapel Hill, they were off that pedestal. And, TCU was a tough test, and UCF as a road test was a tough test. But again, Virginia has 5 wins in a row. Virginia is ranked in the top 20. So I go back to what I said. It's a tough test, maybe the toughest test so far, but it's the biggest opportunity so far. And UNC rattles off a whole bunch of ACC games to finish their season. They've gone through both bye weeks, and there are going to be some huge games coming up for the Tar Heels. And if they want to be competitive for the rest of this year, this is the game where you turn things around, where the reports and the players leaving the program and all the other stuff that's gone on in the first a little over a half a season under Bill Belichick. This is where you begin to change the narrative. And again, say what you will about what has happened in Bill Belichick's tenure in 10 months in Chapel Hill, but I'm not sure that there's anybody else in the coaching ranks, maybe ever, who is as good in terms of being a game coach than Bill Belichick. I mean, there's Super Bowl wins all over the place to prove that. So this could be the point where Bill Belichick gets to do what Bill Belichick does best in a game situation. He'll need to, that's for sure, because a loss to Virginia continues this spiral downward for the UNC team, who, again, has a string of difficult games rounding out the conference schedule, and it's going to be even more difficult if you stack another loss on top of it. And for Virginia, obviously, they remain undefeated in conference games. And if they can go to 6 straight wins overall, that freight train is very much in motion and would stay in motion if they could pick up a win there. All right, we'll go to NC State here. They are on the road. They're at Pittsburgh, who is 5-2, and they've had their own nice little run of late. 3 straight wins. That includes wins at Florida State and at Syracuse. You could probably make the argument that Florida State and Syracuse are a little down the ladder now from where we thought they might have been a little earlier this season, especially Florida State, who's on a losing streak now. But Pitt has gone on the road and won games. That's something that Virginia even has had trouble doing, but Pitt has not. Interesting statistical breakdown on this Pitt roster. There is not a running back on the roster, on the Panthers roster, with more than 225 yards this season, and there's only one running back on the roster with multiple touchdowns. So they're doing this in different ways. It's not just running the ball, ground and pound and pick up wins. What they do have is the 21st ranked defense in a recent ESPN metric. There was a metric that was, measuring, different things for a defense, margin of victory, that sort of thing. And Pitt ranked in the top 25 of defenses. Well, that's going to be an interesting test for C.J. Bailey, for Hollywood Smothers, because when NC State has been good, both of those players have been good. Bailey getting it going through the air, finding his receivers. Hollywood Smothers being able to help NC State control the clock and have extended drives and that kind of thing. So both of those players are going to be essential against this very good Pitt defense. Here was Justin Jolie earlier this week talking about Pitt.
They're aggressive. They're aggressive. They're a hard-cut team. I think their head coach emphasizes that. They're a really good defense too. Really good D-line, linebackers, safeties, all-around good defense. So they're going to bring the pressure. We know that. So that's something that we got to prep for and that we got to get right during practice.
So obviously they'll be working on that this week. NC State's the same situation. And you get on the other end of Pitt and the games get big. We mentioned Georgia Tech and Miami and Florida State and UNC. Like it gets big now every week for NC State down the stretch. So this is kind of a crucial game for them. A good performance at Pitt could help set them up for a great November. If the wheels fall off at Pitt, it might be difficult to get those wheels back on in the proper amount of time. Duke is the one team that does not have to worry about any of this week. They have a bye week. They have an off week, their second one of the season. And again, the only trouble with it, I mean, maybe I'm just splitting hairs here, just trying to find something bad, but the point is they keep getting farther away from their last win. When they played at Cal and put up all those points at Cal, that was a good moment for the program, but that was the last time they won a game. Then there was an off week and then a game against Georgia Tech and now an off week. So by the time they get back in action November 1st against Clemson, they'll be 4 weeks removed from their most recent win. Here is Manny Diaz.
You wish you could get right back to it, but we've got to sit out another week, and we've got to respond. We have 5 games left. We still get to write our own story for this season in terms of what happens next. There's going to be a lot of teams in the country that are going to lose a conference game. You know what I mean? So all the things that we want to play for, in theory, are still there. But we've got to look at our process and own, the mistakes that we made. And again, while giving them credit at the same time, to win these type of games, you just got to be better in those situations.
That's Diaz talking about that loss to Georgia Tech. And, he mentioned, the teams are going to lose games in the conference. What he's trying to say is the Georgia Techs of the world doesn't feel like they'll end up going undefeated for an entire season, and so Duke has got to their margin for error has shrunk, but they've got to try to keep pace game to game to game if they want to catch up with the likes of Georgia Tech by the time they get to the end of a season. It's an interesting dynamic for a Duke team that had the best record of the 3 triangle teams last year. They have a chance to have the best record of the triangle teams this year, and Manny Diaz believes that he's got something going, some momentum that can go year to year to year, and something he can use to build a strong recruiting class coming in. So these next games for Duke aren't just big for 2025. They're big for what's down the road. They're big for the story that Diaz wants to write for this program, is that it's not the Duke of even a few years ago. It's a different batch, a different group. It goes back to the ACC kickoff in Charlotte when this group of seniors, older players, were talking about when they first came to Durham, and they were first talking about how they wanted to rewrite the history of the program. And to an extent, they've done that. But another 9-win season or 10-win season could put them in the position where that becomes the norm as opposed to what it was just a few years ago. So interesting. It's there's a little bit of heat, a little bit of pressure kind of across the board for completely different reasons. UNC and Bill Belichick just trying to get it between the rails for the first time. Dave Doran and NC State needing to finish strong after a strong start to the season and stumbling a bit in the middle part of the schedule. And Duke sort of looking to the future and thinking that a strong season this year means they have, and to use the football terminology, stacked success, and they can take that and run with it in the weeks and years to come. All right, that's it. We are set here for the next week of college football. We're at the end of October, if you can believe it. Obviously, November is going to be, an amazing month of football, but the other half of it is there are five Saturdays of football in November. So you're talking about almost half a season for the Triangle teams just in games played in the month of November. So for all of the lead up and all the stuff that's happened up to this point, a lot of stories are still to be written in the month of November. And every week we will be here on CBS 17 Plus. We'll be talking about teams and games and matchups. And there is going to be a lot of interesting storylines, without a question, probably with all 3 schools, I'm going to guess, over the next month or so. Thank you very much for watching the College Blitz. Please check us out week after week here on CBS 17 Plus. I'm Kevin Holden. Thank you very much for watching.
This is the College Blitz on CBS 17 Plus.